I am in a pretty wonderful season of life. I'm happily married for coming up on 11 years. My wife and I, yeah, okay. My wife and I celebrated our 10th anniversary last year. We've got 3 kids, 5, 8, and 9. We just moved. We're across the street from where our kids go to school. So we're in the big city, but we get the small city kids walking to school on their own kind of thing. My life is full of Saturday pancakes and dates with my wife and little coffee dates with my daughters. I was with Alaska today. I mean, it is just a good season. People outside of the church I talk to at times, and they complain about marriage, and they say, if I get married, I'm going to have to give up my sexual freedom. Honestly, I've been married 11 years. I don't know what to do with that but mock, relentlessly, just to mock that viewpoint. Good sex life, we've said before here, it's like wine. It ages. The longer you wait, the better it gets. I've been married 11 years, that's all I'm saying. We can have a conversation about it later. Anyways, here's what I'll tell you, though. Here's what I want to tell you. I don't deserve any of that. I don't deserve a single bit of that. I can say that. I'm not saying that in like an award ceremony kind of way, like, oh, I don't deserve any of this. But really, I don't deserve a single. Here's what I deserve. I deserve to be divorced. I deserve to be a single dad, maybe no dad at all, maybe never get to see my kids. That's what I deserve. I know that. I know that as certain as I know anything in my life. But I didn't always know that. There was a time, particularly early on in our marriage, where I thought I was pretty great. I thought I was really nailing all of it. And then one day, about 3 years into our marriage, I found myself separated from my wife, sleeping in the basement, really talking to her only to say, when am I going to watch the kids? When are you going to watch the kids? Sleeping on a mattress, staring up at the ceiling, just thinking, what in the world happened? And it was during that time that this passage here in Deuteronomy 8 changed my life completely. Completely changed my life, this passage. Some of you are here today, you're married. Some of you are single, wanting to be married. Some of you are engaged. Some of you are in a time of plenty. Some of you are broke. You're all over the place. Here's what I want to say. I have no doubt, I have zero doubt that if you listen, if you pay attention to this passage today, there is some life-changing stuff in here. There's some life-changing principles in this passage today. I want you to hear that. Here's where we're going. We've been talking about communion with God. What does it look like to live life with God? Not just checking in once a month, not just coming to church, but living life with God, communing with Him. And we've been, as a way to explore that, we've been kind of roughly following the outline of the Lord's Prayer. So Jesus' disciples asked Him, how should we pray? And Jesus gave him this prayer. So we've been going through that. We looked first, how do we live with God knowing that He is our gracious Father? And then we said, how do we live God doing the work that He's called us to do in the world, to see His name treasured and hallowed? And then, how do we live with God? Last week we said living with God means that our hearts will be bent towards generosity and justice. And He will give us everything we need if we're communing with Him to live that life. So today we're going to follow along in that line, and here's what we're going to be asking today. We're going to be asking this. What about the seasons when it seems like God just isn't there? Especially circumstantially. What about those seasons when it seems like everything is falling apart? When it seems like God has abandoned us? What about What about when you're struggling to put food on the table? You didn't think that you're struggling just to make ends meet, to make rent every month, and then you lose your job. What about that season? What about the relationship you thought was such a sure thing, you were betting everything on, and then you wake up one day and it's just gone. You had the talk, and it's just over. What about when you're laying on a dirty mattress in a basement that just flooded, staring up at the ceiling, wondering if your kids are going to call the basement dad's room in 10 years? What about those seasons of hunger? About this when your circumstances fall apart and it seems like God is there? Or to put it positively, because that was rather negative, to put it positively, how do we trust God with our daily bread? Right? So in the Lord's Prayer, Jesus says, pray this: give us this day our daily bread. What does it mean to rely on God for my daily bread? And we're going to be looking at this passage in Deuteronomy 8, where God is addressing the wandering Israelites as they're coming into the land of promise. And we're going to see, I'm going to give you some background on that, but we're going to see some things there. The first thing we're going to see is that God lets us hunger sometimes. In certain seasons, God lets us hunger. The second thing is, and it's really a very simple outline today. First thing, God lets us hunger. Second thing, God lets us hunger for good reasons. And then I'm going to give you 4 of those reasons. Okay? Let's start. I'm going to just read the first 2 verses here, maybe 3 verses. This is Moses talking. The whole commandment that I command you today, you shall be careful to do. Why? That you may live and multiply and go in and possess the land that the Lord swore to give to your fathers. And you shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness, that he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. Deuteronomy 8:3 it's like a life verse for me. Here it goes. And he humbled you, and he let you hunger, and he fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Okay, here's the background. So here's what has happened to God's people. I'll pick it up in the book of Exodus. So God's people are enslaved, right? And then God spectacularly delivers them from that slavery in Egypt. Right? So he's bringing plagues. He's showing his power. He brings them out. He parts the Red Sea. He's leading them by a cloud of fire by night, pillar of cloud by day. God spectacularly delivers them from slavery. And God promises to bring them to the land of promise, to bring them to a place, a future reality that is beyond anything that they can currently comprehend. Right? Second. And then along the way, though, they're passing through the desert. Along the way, there are trials. There are circumstantial hardships. They are hungry and they don't know where food is going to come from. They're thirsty and they don't know where water is going to come from. And the Egyptians are coming and they're going to kill them, right? And when that happens, those of you familiar with the story, how do they respond? Fear, complaining, rebellion, generally that kind of thing, right? Like a whiny kid almost. 1 Corinthians 10:6 says this: now these things took place as examples for us. Speaking of the story of God's people. These things took place as examples for us, that we might not desire evil as they did. What that means is, if Christians, that means that you should be looking at the story of the people of God throughout the Old Testament and be able to see yourselves in their story and to learn from it. okay, to avoid some of these evil things that they've done. So let's just go through it. Let's ask of this. Has God delivered you spectacularly from the slavery that you were in? I mean, that's the story of Christianity, right? God spectacularly delivered you from the slavery that you were in. 2, has he or has he not promised to bring you to a future reality that's beyond anything that you can currently comprehend? Yeah? And then along the way, is it not true that there are trials, there are desert moments, there are times of circumstantial hardship? And then in those times of circumstantial hardship, is it also not true that our temptation is to fear, to complain, to freak out, even to rebel? So this passage is for us. This passage has something to give us today, okay? First thing that I think we see, and I'm going to read those first 3 verses about 8 times, and I don't care whether you like it or not, because you need them. Here we go. I'm going to just read. I'll read 2 and 3 again. You shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness, that he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. And he humbled you and let you hunger, and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Okay, what's the first thing we see here? The first thing that jumps out is God sometimes lets us hunger. God sometimes lets his people hunger. He allows it to happen. Think of the situation for a minute here, just in case you're lacking an emotional connection to this story. The situation is God has spectacularly delivered Israel. Now they're in the desert, and it's very true that if they don't have some way to eat, they are going to die. They're not just making that up, right? They're not like whiny kids asking for cotton candy, right? It's not that situation. That's a different situation. But they're not that. They're actually like wondering, how are we going to live? How are we not going to die here? Again, I'll ask, have you been there? Have you been in the situation where it feels like your circumstances are falling apart? You don't know how you're going to make it to the next day. You don't know how you're going to make it. Everything that you thought was sure is just going away. I've been there. And the point is, the first thing I want us to see with certainty from this text is that sometimes God's the one that puts us there. Sometimes God is allowing our situation to go there because he wants to teach us something we're going to see in a minute. Now, always, if we're in a position of circumstantial need, God is allowing that. But sometimes he's doing it because he wants to teach us. Sometimes God lets us hunger. It says right here, he humbled you and let you hunger and fed you with manna. You know what manna means? What's that? That's what manna means. What's that? He fed you with manna, which you did not know. Sometimes, so here's what I want you to take from that. If you are in a season of hunger, some of you maybe have never been there. Okay, we all hate you. For the rest of us, if you find yourself in a season of hunger, it is a very wise and biblical thing to pray, God, did you put me here? God, do you have me here for a reason? Is there something you're trying to teach me here? He's not always going to be teaching you through that way, right? Sometimes he is. So it's a wise and biblical thing. So that's the first thing. God lets us hunger. Second thing, God lets us hunger for good reasons. Okay? For good reasons. I'm going to pick it up let's do 3 through 5. He humbled you and let you hunger and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Okay, listen to the emotional tone of these next verses. Okay, pay really close attention to that. Your clothing did not wear out on you, and your foot did not swell in these last 40 years. Know then in your heart that as a man disciplines his son, so the Lord, God, your God, disciplines you. So God allows us to he allows his people to go into seasons of hunger. But when he does that, it's for good reasons. When he does that, it's because letting us hunger is substantially better than something else. Letting us hunger is going to get us to a place that we would not have gotten to otherwise. Letting us experience that physical, circumstantial need is going to bring us to a place that's way better than anything that we could have imagined. God lets us hunger for good reasons. Or another way to say it is, God only lets us hunger when hunger is far better than the alternative. Okay? He only lets us hunger when it's far better. And this is not do you hear that in the text? This is fatherly. He does it as a father, right? He's got a fatherly approach to this. Some of you had dads that, like every bad thing that happened to you was good for character. Builds your character. It's good. This is not that. This is a kind, loving God looking at you and saying, I want something so much better than where you're at right now, and so I'm going to let you hunger. For instance, if I was on a road trip with my kids, and this has happened before, I'm going to say me, but this is more my wife that would make this call. So let's say I'm on a road trip with my kids, and it's 60 miles to the next the grocery store, and the only thing close is, 5 miles away, there's a McDonald's, right? And the kids are groaning and complaining about being hungry. Right, Dad, we're hungry, we're going to die, we're going to, whatever. My kids are a little bit dramatic. And it's a choice between hunger and McRib, mystery meat, what the hell is this thing? It's like sponge, whatever. I don't know, Peter loves those things, but I'm going to, if it's a choice between that and hunger, I'm going to pick hunger. I'm going to pick the thing that is better for them. Does that make sense? God does that with us. Some of you guys think that I'm a bad dad because of that, right? You were judging me right now. You're bad. Just let him have the McRib, My kids will visit yours in the hospital. How about that? Sometimes, where were we? Got on this McDonald's. I don't know. So he does it for good reasons. God will only... That relationship that was so precious to you, God will only let that die if he's going to bring you to his... God doesn't like it when you have to worry about where your rent is coming from. He's not a punitive God like that. I mean, that would be a poor father, right? He's only going to let that happen if he wants you to get to a different place than you would have got to otherwise, okay? So he does it for good reasons. Now, what I want to do is, from this text, I want to pull out 4 reasons why he would do that. 4 reasons that we can kind of get our heads around and start thinking about, okay? Here's the first one, and it's pretty obvious. The first reason why he would do that is to confront us with our pride. First reason why God would allow us to go through a season of hunger is to confront us with our pride. So here's a question for you. I'm gonna read this again and think about, I'm gonna read verse 3 again. Think about this question. What problem is God trying to solve by allowing his people to hunger? What problem is he trying to solve? And he humbled you and let you hunger and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. So what problem is there? I mean, it's pretty simple, right? Obviously, the problem here is that God's people believe that there is life to be had outside of him. They believe that life equals bread. Life equals the circumstantial provision that is just right in front of me, right? Can you relate to that? That's what life consists of, right? So if it says here that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, obviously what they're thinking is that man lives by bread alone, right? That's the problem that he's trying to get after. And that's pride. So pride is not only believing that I am better than everyone else. Pride is also, biblically, believing that I can do what only God can do. Pride is not only believing that I'm better than everyone else. Pride is putting myself in the position of God. Believing that I can do, or I should do, or it's up to me to do what only God can do, that I can provide in the way that only God can provide. I'll put it a third way. Another way to put it is, pride is believing that I'm the only one who cares, biblically. I'm the only one who cares about my survival. I'm the only one who cares if I have bread or not. I'm the only one who cares if I'm happy or not. That's pride. That's saying to God your Father, you don't care. You don't care about me. And it's up to me to figure out how to survive. Now, God says we should work hard. Yeah, we should work hard. Hard work, good, godly thing. But your survival is not up to you. Your survival is not up to you. I mean, think about the teachings of Jesus, right? Every hair on your head is numbered. There's not a bird that falls to the ground that the Father doesn't see it. And you think that he doesn't care about you? Are you not of more value than they? It's pride. It's pride. It's saying to our Father, you don't care. I'm the only one who cares. Survival is up to me. That there is life in bread alone. Let's get into it for a minute here. So here's my problem. If I can just put it concisely and maybe even oversimplify a little bit. My problem is I wanted to control my daily bread. When you get right down to it, the problem that, unbeknownst to me, I had carried with me my whole life was that I wanted to be in control of my survival. I wanted to be in control of my daily bread. I believed that it was up to me to provide for myself. And so I became kind of an obsessive control freak, but not in an out-and-out way. Now you're going to learn some ugly truths. We have it's a bit of a smaller crew today because of Mother's Day. A little bit thankful for that. This is going to be a little bit vulnerable. So kind of obsessive control freak. Now, for me, it was a couple things that I wanted to control. I wanted a good sex life. Wanted to be affirmed and loved. I wanted plain old, ordinary, circumstantial comfort and ease, right? A nice house to go home to, that kind of thing. And I wanted to be right. I wanted people to know that I was right, that I had it together. So in order to get those things, what I would do is I just became a master manipulator, right? By the way, deadly at Monopoly. Deadly at Monopoly growing up. I think that's where it started, freaking Monopoly. But seriously, it'd be like, you could buy the railways. You could. You could sell them to me too, if you want. Anyways, master manipulator, right? So some things would go wrong, and I would do something wrong, and someone would point the finger at me, and I was the master deflector, just blame. You know people like that? Blaming everyone else for everything. Convincing my wife that everything was her fault. Sick stuff. Trying to put a show, make a big show of how great it was all the time. Dishonest, never really admitting how selfish I was, not even to myself. And so you do that in your marriage. I mean, this is why marriages implode, right? Because after a while, your partner is either going to get more and more and more and more dysfunctional, or it's just going to die, right? Because for my wife, she was in this little tiny cage of control that I had her in, and one day she just had enough. Now, I was really fortunate and blessed to have the Spirit of God working in my life, a family around me to say, hey, you're an idiot. Sometimes you need that. To have the family of God around me to help me with that. But we were separated. 3 months. Didn't really talk much. And the way that I describe that is rehab, right? That's the closest thing I know to it. Because when you've spent your whole life trying to control all of the inputs, trying to control your daily bread and everything you need, and then all of a sudden that gets taken away, it feels like, I felt like I was going through withdrawal symptoms. The point was, though, that I did not trust God with my survival. I did not trust him with my daily bread. I was not communing with him and getting the things that you can only get from God. Instead, I was trying to get them from everybody else. That was the issue. Sometimes God puts us through a season of circumstantial hunger, circumstantial devastation and need to wake us up and confront us with our pride. And maybe you walked in today and it's been that kind of a week for you. And the first thing I would say, it's a biblical and wonderful thing to ask. God, are you trying to confront me with my pride? Ask yourself, am I the one? Do I think that I am the only one who cares about me? It's pride. It's pride. Second thing. The second reason why God would, from this text, allow us to go through a period of circumstantial need would be to strengthen our humility. You have to love the poetic irony of this text, right? So the Israelites, here's their mentality all throughout the book of Exodus. God, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but this is the desert. We're out here, several million of us, and there's no food. And we would like to bring to your attention that we need food to survive, and apparently you've forgotten about that. So we've got the options laid out. Here they are. We can either go back to Egypt where we were slaves, or we can die. Those are our options. We're going to go back to the meat pots, we can go back to slavery, or we're dead. That's it, right? And so what does God do? God says, those are the options? How about I rain down bread from the sky? How's that for an option? The surprise third option. They don't even know what it is. You know what I mean? Like it's such a surprise they can't even name it. What is it? They don't even know what this stuff is. Is that not poetically? That's hilarious. It's hilarious. The irony is just dripping in that. I want to give you an illustration here. Again, man, gosh, I don't even want to talk about this. About a year and a half ago, we had just such a hard season. Some of you guys remember this. We found out that my daughter Alaska had cochlear malformations in her ears. She's completely deaf in one ear. And then the way that it works is you never really know when the other one, we still don't know, when the other one is going to go, okay? And what that meant was that we were going to have wicked good insurance. Now, I don't know if you know this about a church our size and about pastors in general, but this is not Tony Soprano rolling in it kind of years for the Youngren family. You know what I mean? I had a little bit of that at Amazon. I know what that's like. This really ain't it. And a year and a half ago, it really wasn't it, right? It really wasn't it. And we were trying to get out of debt and all kinds of things. And then we needed all this extra money to get good insurance. And we were on state insurance. And we had this dilemma where we didn't have the money to give me a high enough raise to get the extra insurance. So we were just, you can ask the elders. We did not know what to do. And it seemed like our only options were, A, I mean, this is where it was going to go. One option was going to be that my wife was going to have to go to work, and I would become like part-time for the line. So think about it in terms of like sermon every other week instead of sermon every week. Sometimes we'd come in and maybe sing an a cappella chorus and go home. Or B, uninsured. Like those were our paradigms, right? Just A or B, that's it. And so we're praying about it. I mean, it's just the worst. Christmas was all right, but the day after Christmas, we had to tell Alaska, probably the worst day of my life. It was just emotionally just so hard and devastating. And right before, like the week before, Kayla was about to go out and start looking for these jobs to get the insurance, we got this letter in the mail, and it said, we own a house in Seattle, and we were losing money on that, and it basically said, your mortgage rate has gone from X percent to half of that. And literally the exact amount that Kayla would have made working, we just got. It just showed up out of nowhere because our mortgage rate was adjustable, right? So God provided in this, not A, not B, not the limited circumstances we could see, this totally miraculous, what is it, third way, right? That's humbling. When that happens, you know exactly who you are and exactly who God is, right? When that surprise third way, bread out of freaking heaven, when that happens, there's just no mistaking, I am this big and God is this big. Sometimes God allows us to go through a season of hunger where all we can see is A and B so that he can surprise and delight us with option C that we never thought was coming in order to strengthen our humility, in order to remind us who we are and who he is. Okay? So that's 2. 1, confront with our pride. 2, strengthen our humility. 3, and we'll kind of camp out on this one. The third reason is to train us toward communion with him. To train us toward communion with him. Let me just read this again. And he humbled you, and he let you hunger, and he fed you with manna. So, like I said, this is a life-changing passage for me, so every single word of this verse is special to me. And this one stands out. He fed you. He fed you. He did. The intimacy of that language just astonishes me. Here's a question for you. Those of you that remember the story, how often did this happen? God feeding with manna, which would fall from the sky. How often did that happen? Every day, right? Every day. Question, when Jesus tells his disciples what to pray for, what does he, and he talks about bread, what does he say? Give us this day our daily bread. Why is that? Why is that? Why would the bread, do you remember what would happen when they would try to save up like 7 days of bread? Right? Which seems like it'd be a good thing, right? We're going to save for the future. They try to save up 7 days of bread, and the next day would be like this moldy, messy, like thing that they'd have to throw out. Right? Why was it daily? Why was it a daily thing? Why does God want us to pray for our daily bread? It's because he wants to be with us. He wants us to come home for dinner. Right? He wants to be with us every day. He doesn't want it to be. Now, some of you, are you wired like this? This is what I'm wired like. So God, sometimes, right? God is training me, God is helping me. But sometimes, God blesses me extraordinarily and gives me far beyond what I need for today. And my reaction is like, sweet. Now I don't have to think about God at all for like a month, right? right? Sometimes God lets us go through seasons of hunger because he wants to train us for daily communion with him. He wants us to be going to him. Think about this. When you have had, if you have had, like I said, some of you maybe not, but if you have had a period of extreme circumstantial need, right? If you have had that relationship that falls apart, the family member gets sick, the job is lost, your career is toast, you didn't get into the school that you thought you were going to get into. If you've had that happen, what are you doing in that season? You're praying like you've never prayed before, right? Some of you, that's like how you became a Christian, right? You never prayed in your life, and then this thing happened, and then all of a sudden it's like, these seasons bring us to prayer, like bring us to communion with God, train us toward communion with God, unlike anything, in a way that nothing else can. We're not made, we like to say here a lot, we're not made for life alone. There is a limit to how much you can grow alone. There's a limit to how much you can survive alone. And that's especially true when it comes to God. We're not meant for life without him. We cannot have life, our life does not exist, does not consist of the bread, the circumstantial things that are right in front of us. True life consists in communion with God. So I'm just going to ask it again. How many of you are, you don't have to, we're not going to do a weird hand thing, but how many of you are there right now? This is your season right now. I just went through, like maybe mid-January to mid-March, went through just a tough season, just emotionally low season. Maybe I have always struggled with the seasonal affective disorder thing, but this year it was just, I felt every cloud, it felt like. It was hard for me to get out of bed. So how many of you are there right now? You're desperate. You feel like you're at the end of it. Before we hit the last point, I just want to tie it all kind of together for you. Everything we've said so far, maybe a few things on the end, so we can put this to good use, especially those of you that are desperate, that are in it right now. I want you to hear this, okay? The first thing, I have seven points of application, but they're not going to take the whole time. Don't worry about it. The first thing we said is if you're in a season of hunger, if you are desperate, if you don't know where the train is headed, first thing you can do is you need to ask your Father, have you put me here? Have you put me here to teach me something? You need to humble yourself and go to your Father and ask. No, he's not, like I said, it's not always the way that he's going to teach you. And sometimes he's going to allow you to suffer the hurt in the world along with Christ, as we read in Romans 8, as part of your future inheritance. So you're going to bear up with that suffering just like everyone else. It's not about anything that he's teaching you. It's just about being a human. But sometimes he's teaching you through it. Sometimes he is teaching you, wants to teach you something specific. Second thing, ask yourself this: do I believe that I am the only one who really gives a damn about whether I survive or not? Do I believe that my survival is up to me and no one else cares? And you can hear it in the way you talk, by the way. I can hear it as a pastor pretty quickly when that's what you believe. It's pride. Do I have a deep pride that says I'm the only one who's looking out for me? That God wants to confront me with. Third thing, ask, is this an opportunity? Is God giving me an opportunity to strengthen my humility by kind of blowing my expectations out of the water? By the way, sometimes I think you have this third one and not necessarily the second one. So the situation that I mentioned before where we were financially hurting, with Alaska and all of that, that wasn't really like God was teaching us a lesson or disciplining us. That was more about God just wanted to blow our minds a little bit. Right? So is this an opportunity for my humility to be strengthened when God blows my expectations? Number 4, I think you need to take other people with you on this journey. I think if you're in this situation and you are asking these kinds of questions, you need the family of God walking with you. You need to have people that you can trust enough to let them know what is going on. God can do anything. I do not know if I would be married right now, if not for people, faithful people, getting in our business, asking what is going on, and helping us through it. Number 5, and this is no matter what, whether God's trying to teach you something or not, this is every season of circumstantial need. In every season of circumstantial need, we can embrace it as a way to strengthen our communion with God. Okay? We can use that opportunity to strengthen our communion with God. Some of you did not have good parents. Let me speak to those of you that did. You remember when you got sick? What was that like? Remember when you got sick when you were a kid? What would happen? Your mom was all over you, right? Your mom was going to the store and picking up Sprite. You never drank soda in your life. She's giving you Sprite and saltines. She's making chicken soup from scratch. You're watching your favorite movies, all of that. She's sitting there. She doesn't care at all whether she gets sick, right? She is next to you. You might be the most infectious leprosy or something, and she's giving you big old hugs. Right? What a sweet time of communion that is. That's us and God. When we're going through times of deep, now you felt like crap, right? When you were sick. You felt awful. But it was a special time between you and your parents, wasn't it? That's us and God when we're going through times of hard circumstantial need. It is a time where we can draw near to God and communion with Him like no other time. And so 6, I think we can be thankful. I think it is possible to be thankful in times of desperation. Here's the last thing. Normally I try to talk throughout the sermon to those of you that are outside of Christianity. And I haven't done that as much today, but this is what I'll say. All of this applies to you too. In that, we've been talking about kind of the micro, the circumstantial, the seasonal thing that happens. But really, this is the story. This is the macro story. This is the story of the whole world. The story of the whole world is we were in a place of desperate need where all we could see was be perfect or judgment. Those were our options. Be perfect or be judged. And the story of Scripture is that God provided miraculously a way for us to return to communion with Him. He brought us a solution that we never saw coming, grace. He sacrificed His own son. Do you know that the Scriptures called Jesus the bread that came down from heaven, the bread of life? If you're here today and you're outside of Christianity, you can have that. You can have that. Last point, save this one for last because it's not really an exhortation, it's more of just great. I just love the end of this passage. Last reason that God would allow us to go through a season of circumstantial hunger is to get us ready for a world without hunger. Get us ready for a world without hunger. We are headed, scripturally, to a place where face-to-face communion with God, walking with Him, living with Him, being sustained by Him, face-to-face, in a way that you and I have never known, never will know in this life. We're headed to a place where that's going to be a daily reality. No death, no pain, no sorrow, no hunger. Going through a time of circumstantial hunger right now that leads us to the day-to-day communion that we're going to be having for eternity means that we can have a piece of eternity now. We can be with God in the way that we'll be with him in eternity a little bit more now. Sometimes God allows us to go through a season of physical hunger to get us ready for that future. I'm just going to read the end of this passage, and then we'll close. So you shall keep the commandments of the Lord your God by walking in his ways and by fearing him. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land of brooks of water, of fountains and springs flowing out of the valleys and hills, a land of wheat and of barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey. You know what honey is in Scripture in this time? Honey's like caviar. A land in which you will eat bread without scarcity, in which you will lack nothing, a land whose stones are iron, and out of whose hills you can dig copper, and you shall eat and be full. And you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land that he's given you. Let's pray.